The coveted golden dice, the reward for clearing honor mode, and I am happy to say I cleared it on my first attempt live for everyone during my live stream, and this is my setup for my team comps that I did to clear it. Hey guys, before we dive in, Ronan here, I just want to say I will be starting a new live stream for a Dark Urge Evil modded playthrough starting on the 19th of April. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to be using a lot of mods for subclasses, graphic mods, and everything else in between. So it'll be a really good time. So if you enjoyed this live stream, for those that joined in for my first honor mode, definitely check out the next one. It's going to be a lot of fun. So my party comp really is similar to what most people would consider to be original D&D comps. I have my Brawler / tank, which for my party was Karlach. I have a healer and support, which was Shadowheart. I had a ranged character, which was my Astarion. And I had my main character to be whatever I wanted, and in this case, I went with my Frost Mage build because it's one of my favorite builds to date. The reason I enjoy this type of party comp is because this will allow you to make mistakes and still recover. On screen now is part of a clip I have of Cazador where I am literally having the worst time ever. I'm level 10, no daylight. Despite all that, with this party comp, I was able to come back, recover, and still win despite a terrible start. Hey guys, so before I break down the videos and the builds and whatnot, I do want to state that I didn't know once you clear honor mode, you cannot go back in your save file and play the game. It puts you back in the epilogue once you clear the game on honor mode, which is where I'm at now. So a lot of the footage in today's video will be from my live stream directly, or me recreating the same builds in a different file. That way it's easier for you to follow along. Starting out though, we are going to talk about my Frost Mage first, because the Frost Mage is a build I made previously that I really loved, one of my favorite builds to date, but this one is a variant of that is a Frost Mage Sorlock, going 10 levels into Sorcerer and 2 levels into Warlock. So let's break this one down first, because this one is honestly the easiest to understand. Starting out, you have my stats you see on screen now. These are stats you can get pretty much as soon as you get to Act 3 between gear and feats. I do want to state this character is utilizing the Hag's Hair, so because of that, when you do your starting stats, the only starting stat that is required is going to be 17 Charisma. All the other starting stats will be up to you, but I did start out 16 Dex and 14 Constitution because I do find the extra AC you have from Dexterity to be a little stronger than extra HP. The extra HP realistically won't save you, but having extra AC will, because one will completely nullify someone hitting you, which is really strong in honor mode. And you get an extra initiative as well, which is why I think the extra Dexterity over Constitution is a little better here. Now, when it comes to my gear, let's go ahead and break this down after I talk about my feats. So I used my Hag's Hair to get Charisma to 18. My first feat is ASI, Ability Improvement. That way you can get your Charisma to 20. My second feat is going to be Dual Wielder. That way you can dual wield staffs, which is fantastic because the staves you gain in game are very, very powerful. And with that, that's the only feats that you have. And I actually think I did take the dual wield staff feat first, but I would recommend getting Charisma because the extra hit chance and damage you'll do is going to be a little bit better than the dual wield staff in my opinion. So when it comes to what makes a sorcerer really powerful, it's going to be the fact that you can do extra damage. So you have whatever element you choose, assuming you follow this build, Draconic, Ancestry, White. This means at level 6, all of my frost spells will do additional damage equal to my charisma modifier, which is very, very strong. Because I have 22 charisma with this build, with the gear that I have, that's going to be plus 6 damage on any frost spell. Now here's when things come together really, really strong. And let's take a look at my weapons first. So I do have the Spell Sparkler, which honestly for this build specifically, I like using over the Frost Staff because the extra damage you gain from the orbs stacks up really high. And this is actually really powerful when using magic missiles. And trust me, with how high characters' ACs are in game and honor mode, magic missiles is a spell you will use a lot and pretty often. So the Spell Sparkler, despite being something you get in Act 1, I used throughout the entire playthrough of my honor mode. It's very, very powerful. Eventually, you will get the legendary staff here, and the reason you want that is for the extra spell save DC and attack rolls, but you do have the ability to choose an element, and I went cold, so all of my cold spells will do additional damage to my proficiency, which at max level was +4. So already all my spells that are frost are going to be doing +10 damage now. This will allow any spell to also apply encrusting frost as well, which is really powerful because that means any spell can debuff the enemy. Now, assuming you are doing a positive playthrough and not killing the tieflings, you can get the Potent Robe. This is the go-to chest piece that you're going to use for this type of build because this will give your cantrips additional damage to your charisma modifier. Well, you have Ray of Frost, a frost cantrip. Well, this will double dip. This is going to gain the benefit from being a draconic ancestry white. It gains the benefit from my chest piece. It gains the benefit from the legendary staff as well. So this thing can hit really, really hard. The necklace you see on screen now is not one I use in combat, it's just to restore my spell slots. But if you use the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation, that will add your charisma modifier to any elemental cantrip as well. So things like Firebolt, Shocking Grasp, all that will gain additional modifiers from gear. But your Ray of Frost, if you use the Elemental Necklace, gains even more modifiers. Or you could use the necklace you see on screen now if you want to add a little bit more reverberation, which is what I ended up doing because I did find, although you can hit really hard with your Ray of Frost, your Warlock Eldritch Blast is going to be far superior because this will also scale with charisma. So your chest piece will affect Eldritch Blast, but you also gain the benefit of Agonizing Blast that you get from being a Warlock. So your cantrips here for Eldritch Blast scale with your charisma modifier twice, assuming you are using the Potent Robe, making it very, very powerful. The helmet, the birthright, just to get the extra charisma for all those extra modifiers. I didn't know what cloak to use in this character, so I just gave him the extra AC and saving throws. My gloves and boots are all about CC and setting up things to knock enemies prone, which is honestly the only reason why I killed Cazador at level 10 without daylight. Boots of Stormy Clamor, whenever you do a condition to the enemy, they get reverberation, possibly knocking them prone and doing damage. Whenever you do thunder, lightning, or radiant damage, you do reverberation. And because you apply lightning damage from the Spell Sparkler, you are consistently proccing the Gloves of Belligerent Skies. But here's where it gets even better. You have the Coruscation Ring, so whenever you do spell damage to illuminated target, you also do radiant damage to that enemy, which is pretty cool, or like radiating orb damage I should say, so that's a debuff, which then applies your gloves and your boots. And then when you have the Kalos Glow Ring to go with it, you add the radiant damage as well. So your Eldritch Blast that hits multiple times, applies multiple debuffs, does a lot of damage. Magic Missiles that hits a absurd amount of times will apply damage and all these debuff multiple times. And of course, when you want to use your go-to frost spells, they hit really hard, especially if you get the enemy wet first. All right, up next on our list is going to be the support, which was Shadowheart. Initially, I had her as a weird cleric druid hybrid, which there was one fight that the polymorph did help me out a little bit early on. But after talking to chat, they're like, why don't I just make her a life cleric mixed with lore bard? And it was the best choice I could have made. So I did end up respeccing her to be a lore bard 6 levels and then 6 levels life cleric. So my starting stats are on screen now. Feel free to mess around with these to change them as you like, because your 2 feats are only going to be ASI to get your charisma to 20, and despite you having cleric spells, all the cleric spells you use are for support only, so you don't need wisdom, you need charisma. You'll notice the theme here, I have a lot of bards because they're just very, very strong. Now for your first feat, assuming you do go dexterity 15 and charisma as an odd number as well, you're able to get dexterity to 16 and charisma to 18, which is a fantastic choice. And at level 6 lore bard, you do get to have 2 different spells you can learn from other classes. I ended up respecking this character multiple times throughout my playthrough. I ended up sticking with the 6 levels lore bard and 6 levels life cleric, but because you get magical secrets at level 6, all these spells here that you can learn from other classes are very powerful. And I just kept switching, like, what do I want to do? Do I want Warden of Vitalities? That way I have another way to heal. Do I want Spirit Guardians to scale with Charisma instead of Wisdom? Did I want Counterspell? I ended up switching it a lot. The number one I would say to get is Counterspell. That way your healer support can also use their spell slots to stop the enemies from casting. And then the other spell is going to be up to you with whatever you want to use. I think Warden of Vitality is useful if you use it a lot, but I ended up only using it in some fights, so other spells may be more useful for you. So at level 7 is when I respec my character. Initially she was just a hybrid of a weird cleric slash druid starting out early on, which was a mistake. I did like the cleric early on for the bless because it's super useful, but I did respec at level 7 initially, and that's when I was like, all right, lore bard and life cleric's the best route. So the reason you want life domain cleric is because you will heal additional healing 2 plus the spell level, which is really powerful. You get bless and cure wounds for free. For cantrip wise, I went with all utility things since I don't use this character to damage, or when I do, it's not with these spells anyway, it's with bard spells for the most part. And another reason why life cleric is very powerful is because of the ability you have to channel your oath. You get to heal in an AoE around you for a lot of healing, which is really fantastic. And with gear we talk about soon, this is very, very powerful. So I do want to point out some spells here, even though I'm not fully leveled yet. The main cleric spells I used were create or destroy water, so I can get the enemies wet. That way my frost mage could do double damage with their frost spells. You have sanctuary, which is a great way to make sure someone's going to survive. That way they're not going to be hit by direct damage, but can be hit by AoE damage. And I did summon spirit weapon in certain fights. This was actually really useful for Cazador and to help basically take aggro away from other allies. Doesn't do much damage, but it's great to make AI attack them instead of the characters you want to actually live. And of course, when you get your second feat here, it is going to be ASI to get that charisma to 20. And the last 2 spells that I added to my cleric for prepared spells were going to be Spirit Guardians and Mass Healing Word here. With gear that we're going to talk about shortly, this will make sense of why I wanted these 2, but they are going to be really useful for you if you like this type of playstyle that we talk about shortly. Alright, so gear for your bard slash cleric is pretty simple. For the most part, it is all support and CC type gear, I guess you could say. So early on, things that I really liked using were the Whispering Promise in combination with the Ring of Salving, the helm you see on screen now, and the gloves that you see on screen now as well. This will allow you to, when you heal others, you will heal for additional healing, you will give them Blade Ward, and bless. It is very, very powerful. Of course, once you get better gear later on in Acts 2 and 3, you can replace that instead of other things. So now I have the Reviving Hands in combination with the Whispering Promise and the Ring of Regeneration. The reason for that is the Ring of Regeneration counts as a spell, so at the start of combat, I will heal myself, thus giving myself Bless, and the Reviving Hands will allow you to have Blade Ward as well. The Hellrider's Pride Gloves will only apply Blade Ward to others, while the Reviving Hands you get in Act 3 will apply to yourself as well. So at the start of combat, every single turn, my healer and support will gain Bless, and they gain Blade Ward at the same time, making them very, very tanky. Combine that with the Grimskull Helm, this character can no longer be crit, cloak, pick what you want, I went with the Cloak of the Weave in some fights just for the extra spell save DC. I gave myself Reaper's Embrace just to have some type of chest piece to reduce incoming damage, so this reduces incoming damage by 2. Boots I'm using here, Boots of Striding, you get in Act 1 from Minthara. This is great because early on when you use Bless to help your allies, well, whenever you're concentrating on a spell, you can't be knocked prone or shoved, which is why I like using these boots. And if your ally, like your Frost Mage, has ice fields on the ground, you can still walk on those ice fields because you can't be knocked prone while concentrating, which is why I like using them. And of course, the necklace I like using is the Amulet of the Devout. That way I have 3 charges of my Channel Divinity here. And my Channel Divinity I mainly use to do the AoE healing. And of course, when I heal, you can see all that extra healing I get, Blade Ward, Bless, all that fun stuff. It's really, really powerful. Now, when it comes to other gear, it is mainly going to be preference here. Bow, I went Darkfire Shortbow in some cases for haste, but realistically didn't use it all that often. The shield, I ended up switching shields a lot, but I think the Sentinel shield is really powerful for the extra initiative, and because I have no wisdom-based characters, the extra perception is really useful as well. Now early on, because I did have Bless as something I used right away early on, Staff of Arcane Blessing was really powerful to make sure my Bless was a little bit better, but this was shortly replaced with the Blood of Lathander. That way I could have even more survival in this character, and in Act 2 with all the undead that you end up fighting, this is really useful to have. All the other gear though is going to be preference on what you do from Acts 1 to Act 3 what you want, but those are the ones that I like using. Now when it comes to my spells, let's talk about it because there are going to be a lot of spells you may or may not want to use early on. So if you did end up leveling as a cleric first instead of a bard, you can certainly do that. So things like Bless you could use early on right away. We talked about Create Water, Sanctuary, and all that stuff at the beginning of the video when I was breaking it down. But I did want to point out Mass Healing Word is really useful as a bonus action. That way I can simply just bonus action, heal everyone in my party slightly, give them Bless and Blade Ward at the same time. That way I can use my concentration spell on something else. Maybe like CC from Tasha's Hideous Laughter, for example. But Bestow Curse, or Remove Curse I should say, is important mainly in one fight, which is Gortash, which is why I liked having it. And Spirit Guardians, although this one doesn't do a lot of damage, it doesn't matter. You're using it strictly just so you have no way of being knocked prone or pushed back from your boots, and it does a little bit of extra damage when needed. And that's basically my spells. You have tons of different spells you can use in different situations, so mess around with what you think is going to be useful for you. Alright guys, for Karlach specifically, my next character we're talking about who is my big time damage dealer, I do want to state, I had a lot of trouble in certain fights because I had really low initiative. My dexterity was only 10 because I wanted her to be just a hard hitter. And although I did utilize some gear to help mitigate that, it was a problem in certain fights, so I do want you to keep that in mind if you do follow this guide. Some fights are really hard when you have low initiative, so you may want to drop some points into Charisma to get Dexterity instead. That being said, once you get the Gloves of Dexterity, you can pop it on this character and you're totally fine. This is my stat spread I used all the way up into Act 3 when I defeated Raphael. Because Raphael gives you the items you see on screen now that increase your stats really high, you can respec after doing that. This character was 8 levels Oathbreaker Paladin, 4 levels Lore Bard, which will change after you respec because Action Surge honestly really saves me against certain bosses. Taking a look at the Brain, for example, because I messed up while fighting the Brain, Action Surge saved my life and I was able to defeat the Brain despite really messing up. So levels 1 to 12 early on, I'm going to make it clear, this is what I used. Oathbreaker Paladin, 8 levels. Lore Bard, 4. My first feat was Heavy Armor Master to get my strength to 18 while also reducing all physical damage by an additional +3, which does stack with certain gear pieces. My second feat was Great Weapon Master. I respec, and this is what I ended up going with. I was 6 levels Paladin. I actually ended up keeping her a good Paladin, Oath of Vengeance. I went 4 levels Lore Bard, but the final 2 levels I went Fighter to get Action Surge. My first feat was ASI to get dexterity to 18 and wisdom to 16. The second feat is going to be realistically up to you. Savage Attacker or Great Weapon Master, I think both work really well here. Pick preference of what you want. I went Great Weapon Master. And because I do have that gear to increase my other stats, she was just a character that would not only take little damage, had really high initiative, really high HP, had incredible saving throws. It was just an all-around monster of a character. Alright guys, so when it comes to your gear, there's going to be multiple stages of gear you're going to utilize for this character, especially if you do end up respeccing a lot like I did. So as I mentioned earlier, my final build was 6 Paladin, 2 Fighter, and 4 Lore Bard. That way I can gain the benefit of having all my spell slots that Paladins will normally have, plus a level 4 spell slot as well. I gain the benefit of having some really cool Bard spells, some cool Paladin spells, and Action Surge at the same time. So let's talk about endgame gear, and then I'll break it down to the gear I used early on. So once you get all the cool stuff, you're going to end up using the Balduran's Giant Slayer here. This thing is such an incredible weapon. You get Giant Form, which just increases your size, giving you extra HP and damage. So I use this on myself, and all of a sudden my character is a monster. It will do incredible damage when I attack an enemy. 2d6 plus 25 plus an additional 1d6. Like, that's a lot of damage. But it gets even better because we'll talk about other stuff too. So also the Helm of Balduran, stun immunity, can't be crit, +1 bonus to AC and saving throws. I get healed. Like, Helm, fantastic. But that's really late game, and I only used that after I got the Gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength in combination with the Amulet of Greater Health. Of course, if you did save Damon, you get Armor of Persistence, giving you resistance and Blade Ward automatically. So like that in combination with the Paladin buff that you get, Aura of Protection, I am just never going to fail a saving throw. Like, she never fails saving throws against me because of how much extra bonuses that this character has. And when I do get hit in combat, I do additional damage back to the enemy from the Flesh Melter Cloak. Such an incredible character. She kicks so much ass. I'm using the Risky Ring, so I have advantage on attack rolls, so my chance to crit is pretty high despite not having a lot of crit gear. And I did end up taking the Strange Conduit Ring that I was using on Astarion a lot and gave it to this character because you do have quite a few different spells you can utilize. So those spells that you could utilize for that could be Hold Person, it could be Hunter's Mark, or on the Bard side of things, I do have Enhance Ability, which you can also give to an ally or yourself, which is a concentration spell as well. So it's another great way to proc that. Now, other rings and stuff I used early on, I did end up using the Crusher Ring in Act 1 for the extra movement. I had the Amulet of Misty Steps just to have that because it's really powerful. Of course, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers are the best boots in the game, and these are required. These boots are required for this character because my Ice Mage puts ice fields all throughout the battlefield. This is important on this character because she's purely melee, so she will never fall on any ice or anything like that, which is really useful. Another ring that I didn't get, which I would highly recommend you do get though, is going to be the Ring of Free Action. You can use this on whatever character you want. This is specifically really useful in the Cazador fight for Astarion, but I didn't get it on that file, but it's something I would like to recommend here. Early on, glove-wise, Gloves of Dexterity will help mitigate the low initiative you have for having almost no dexterity. The gauntlets, if you want extra damage, Dark Justiciar's gauntlets could work, or even the Flawed Helldusk. Of course, after you defeat Raphael, you have the Helldusk Helmet, which is very powerful. And super early on, you have the Arcane Synergy Helm, which is something I did utilize as well. I do want to give a shout out to the Drakethroat Glaive because this does give you the ability to buff weapons to do additional damage. This is useful because if you utilize this on your mage, specifically a sorcerer, you can twin cast this on your 2 damage dealers, which I put on Karlach and Astarion every single time. And another weapon I used was the Halberd of Vigilance, just because this is one of the best weapons in the game, and you could realistically use this your entire playthrough once you get it because it's very powerful. And before I got this, it was the Everburn Blade. Your bows are going to be up to you. The Hellrider longbow you get in Act 3 can be very useful because this will give you extra initiative as well. So hopefully I explained that pretty well. If you have questions, definitely ask down below. Up next, we have probably the hardest hitting character I had throughout my entire playthrough, and that is going to be the College of Swords Gloomstalker Ranger. This is a multi-class of 8 levels College of Sword Bard in combination of 4 levels Ranger, specifically the Gloomstalker. And I know I'm going to get tons of comments about this, so I'm going to go ahead and address it now. No, I did not use the dual wield crossbow thing. I think that build is so stupid because it's too powerful. I went with this build because this build going with the College of Swords Bard allows you to do great damage still, but because you also multi-class with Ranger and everything else in between, I have the ability to do damage with my bows. My bonus action I utilize by doing spell damage or supporting my allies with spells or CC. The combination of what we're going to talk about is very, very powerful because you are a heavy hitter that can support and CC at the same time. It is such a great combo, and I prefer this over the dual crossbow build because the dual crossbow is all about damage, while this gives me utility at the same time. My starting stats are on screen now. The reason I have them set up like this is because with my first ASI, Dexterity 18, Constitution 16, second ASI, Dexterity 20, and with your third feat, which you could technically do second, is going to be Sharpshooter, so your bow attacks hit really, really hard. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and break down my gear and all that stuff. For the most part, all the gear I utilize is stuff you get throughout Acts 1 and 2, besides a few upgrades you get in Act 3. So the reason why I like this setup, which we talked about earlier, is the fact that I can support, I can damage, I can CC, and do some incredible bursts. Like, you do so much. Most of that comes from your flourishes here that you get with Bardic Inspiration, because you can attack enemies multiple times, and if you do Ascend Astarion, he'll do another D10 of necrotic damage at the same time, which is insane. So slashing flourish ranged, I can attack the same target twice in one turn with a bow attack, which is very, very powerful. Now, I am using the Helmet of Arcane Acuity. That way, after I attack, I get Arcane Acuity, which is a stacking buff to help out my spell save DC. Once you get to Act 3, I do use the Armor of Agility here to get really high initiative, or not initiative, AC, I should say. Until then, you can utilize the Adamantine chest piece that is medium armor if you wish, or use whatever medium armor you want instead. The cloak is the cloak that will heal you whenever you poison a foe. The gloves I'm using are the poisoner's gloves, so whenever I do poison damage, I have a chance to poison the enemy. Combine that with the Broodmother's Revenge. Whenever I'm healed, I apply poison damage to my weapon. You just have a continuous way of consistently poisoning enemies, healing yourself, and reapplying the buff to your weapon. So it's a great combination. And with the support that you have from Shadowheart we talked about earlier, you're going to get healed anyway. So it's a great way to just start that off really, really smoothly. And if you want to get this at the start of combat without using any healing spells, just pop a potion before combat starts. I'm using the evasive shoes for the extra AC, but not required. And the 2 rings I ended up settling with later on was the Caustic Band and the Band of Mystic Scoundrel, which is what makes this build really, really powerful in the first place. In Act 3, you do get the Dead Shot, which is the bow I like utilizing here, mainly because this gives me increased crit chance, but it also gives keen attack. So I have my proficiency bonus is doubled when attacking with this weapon unless I have disadvantage. So my chance to hit with this is really, really nice. It's just an awesome weapon to have. I really like it a lot. So one other thing I do want to point out here is you could technically replace this with other bows if you want. A really powerful bow combination you can do in Act 1 is going to be the combination of the Dead Shot with the Club of Hill Giant Strength. So the Dead Shot is a bow that will apply your strength modifier to your damage dealt. So because the Club of Hill Giant Strength will set your strength to 19 base, you have a +4 modifier. So with this combination here, you automatically will do +4 damage to your bow attacks. Combine that with Sharpshooter to add the another +10, and you're looking at a lot of burst damage really early on. And this combination here is something you can utilize even in Act 3 and do incredible damage. I just really like the extra crit chance the Deadshot gives instead. Now, my go-to weapon choices early on was the Club of Hill Giant Strength with the Knife of the Undermountain King, but later on I did add in the, of course, like the legendary daggers and stuff because they're super powerful. And that's basically it for gear with him. The reason I really like the Band of Mystic Scoundrel here though is because of the ability to essentially do CC and stuff like that. So if you take a look at my spell book here, you have a lot of spells. Ranger spells for the most part no one really cares about. I have good berries just so I can have extra camp supplies when needed. The Hunter's Mark is okay, but I didn't use this all that often, but it is something you could use if you wanted. And of course, Enhanced Sleep is useful, or my other opinion, instead of taking Enhanced Sleep, take another type of like CC you could do if needed. For the Bard, the #1 spell you want is Longstrider. This is incredible to make sure you and all allies have extra movement, which can make or break certain fights. When it comes to my spells though, here's when things get cool. I want you to take a look at how many different illusion and enchantment spells I have. Because if we take a look at our ring, Band of Mystic Scoundrel, after hitting a creature with a weapon attack, I can cast an illusion or an enchantment spell as a bonus action. So that would mean my Vicious Mockery cantrip can be used as a bonus action, giving the enemy disadvantage on their next attack roll. Against bosses, this is really powerful. You have Confusion, which is great against for CC for an AoE of enemies. Greater Illusion, Hold Person, and Silence. Tasha's Hideous Laughter, even Dissonant Whispers. All of these are all things you can use as a bonus action after attacking the enemy. And because you can use Bardic Inspiration for flourishes, you can attack 4 times in 1 round after you get extra attack, which will then proc your Arcane Acuity Helm, giving you tons of extra spell save DC, so more than likely when you use these spells, the enemy will fail their saving throw. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe and comment down below what you want to see next. Let me know what you did for your honor mode, and if you did end up failing, definitely try again, guys. It's really fun and really rewarding when you finally do it. To all my members here, thank you so much for being a member. If you want early access to videos like this, shoutouts at the end of my videos, and some additional perks for my live streams, then hit join down below. I'm Ronan, and I will see you next time. Take care.